Hello, everyone. I'm Ike Eastman, your host of Eastmans Journal Podcast. Today, not only is my backdrop slightly different, I did something unique. That is, interviewed my brother. I haven't had him on the podcast in a literal sense like this, talking about Guy Eastman, talking about who he is, and talking about the information and stuff that he is passionate about and the stuff that he's really good at. So we talk about MRS strategies or hunt plan strategies. He hits some really, really unique information about how you can draw tags every year. We talk about his history, his hunting history, stuff that I wasn't even aware of. He starts to tell Gordon Eastman, Grandpa Gordon Eastman stories, and there's one of those I've never even heard of. Never even heard that story in the 47 years of my life. Then we get into the MRS data, and he talks about the hunt strategies. He talks about his moose hunt. He killed a heck of a moose. So listen to that story. And then we finish it up, and we talk about some of the projects that we got coming out this spring, which are Grandpa Gordon sheep-related, as well as his TED Talk. Wait till you hear what Guy wants to do his TED Talk on. So with that, Guy Eastman, who he is, where we're going. Battlefield of backcountry. In these times of uncertainty, it is important to find communities that share your value and interest. Cryptic has built a reputation for excellence in outdoor gear, providing effective camouflage patterns for all kinds of activities, everything from hunting to tactical operations. Their commitment to quality and epic design is evident in their range of apparel and gear, making Cryptic the perfect choice for any outdoor adventure. Don't miss out on gearing up for the upcoming hunting season with Cryptic today. Obviously, Guy, being your brother, I know a lot of this, but the audience doesn't. And in fact, I think one of the unique things about this podcast is the audience is getting a little bit of a glimpse of who you are that isn't every day, hunting, fishing, the stuff that they're seeing on social media or the stuff that we're filming. It's a little bit more about who you are and growing up, and I want to touch on some of the stuff with Grandpa Gordon and, being able to travel around with him and hear cool stories and all of that stuff. So I guess I'll just start off where did you grow up?
We grew up in, I'll say we because you're my brother, but we grew up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, before it was like it is now, and it was a really cool place to grow up. It's probably the best place I can think of to grow up back then in the 70s and 80s. By the time we got to high school, or I got to high school, graduated in 1990, it had gotten crazy like it is now. But before that, it was just a tourist mountain town, skiing, hunting, fishing. Got the park there, rivers, everything outdoors. I mean, we were outdoors all the time.
Yeah, we grew up without a TV, which is weird.
Yeah, we never had a TV. Like once in a blue moon, Dad would go down and rent a TV. You could actually do such a thing. Rent a TV and a VCR. It was like those, they weren't VCR tapes before then. It was like cassettes, and sometimes like an Atari or something for a holiday. If we had a holiday, we thought it was a big deal because that was, it's cool. It's Christmas. He's getting us something, to do for Christmas. But it was to keep us out of his hair, I think, while he worked. So. Come to find out, as we've become parents, it was the easiest way to keep us entertained while we were home from school. Yeah, inside when we weren't on the ski hill. So, That's right. I mean, the ski hills basically babysat us while Mom and Dad worked and built this business.
Yeah. So, you had a unique experience because you were the oldest of all the grandkids. Was it your first hunt was with Grandpa Gordon?
Yes.
So let's talk about that. Your first hunt was it was over here, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was in Park County.
Yeah. Gordon lived in Cody at the time, and we came. Our Uncle Rod, brought me over here, and I actually had 2 deer licenses back then. You could You could have 2 buck licenses. It's possible to do it here still today, but I had 2 buck licenses, so I could kill 2 bucks, and I had my general tag, and I drew a special limited quota tag over here, so I could kill a whitetail buck and a mule deer buck, and came over here.
And it was 14 then, right?
Yes,
Because
it had to be 14.
right?
So I was 14 years old, freshman in high school, I believe, and it was November, and we got a lot of snow, knee-deep snow, and all those bucks piled out of that high country. Gordon had a buddy who had a ranch in Meeteetse, the Antler Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
Mike May was good friends with him and let me hunt on there. We got an early storm, and it was crazy. It was knee-deep. Like, I still haven't seen a storm here like that. I've lived over here for over 25 years, but it was nuts. And when we went up there, it was like nothing I've ever seen before, because Mike May had a field he planted with peas for cattle feed. And those deer, there was literally thousands of deer in those fields, thousands of deer. All those bucks came piling out of that high country.
That had to be something to see.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive.
I'd
never seen anything like it. And I grew up, in big buck country over in Jackson Hole. And we drove through Meeteetse, and there was the general season went, I believe, to the 10th of November then. And there we drove through town in the middle of the day and parked on the backs of trucks. Of course, that was before ATVs, so back of trucks, Jeeps, horse trailers. We counted 15 30-inch bucks.
Oh, my gosh.
On the back of trucks in one day. All those bucks piled out of that high country, and they massacred them. Massacred them, and they've still not come back. And that's been, well, 35 years ago.
That would have been like 87.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been the year that this was born, that Eastmans Publishing was born.
Yep.
Same year.
Huh. Yep.
So I want to get to traveling around with Grandpa, which you spent a lot of time with him, which is really cool. But before we go into that, so then the next hunt, which is an iconic photo, and we were the social media team and I were going through old posts of Facebook recently, just drumming up, seeing what we'd put on there. And there's a photo of you with a buck hanging, and you're sitting in the back of a pickup. You had to have been 14 or
15. That was the next year.
Oh yeah, because you were driving probably.
I wasn't old enough to drive yet, because I turned 16 in November 30th. But Frankie was old enough to drive, and he had a hardship license, and so we drove his little 2-wheel drive Ford over to Teton Pass, because I knew a spot. Dad had taken me there before, as you know. And we went up Darby Creek and killed that buck.
And then drug him the whole way out because you had no idea
what
to do.
We didn't know how to break a deer down back then. We gutted it out and drug him like 2 miles, took turns doing it. And by the time we got we passed some sheep hunters on the trail, and they were looking at us like, what in the world are you kids doing? They were just shaking their heads. That's tough country to hunt a sheep in. I don't know who was dumber, us or them, but either way, they looked at us like we were a bunch of dumb kids, and we were. I mean, basically our tennis shoes, Levi's, jackknife in our pocket, and a Snickers bar, and up the mountain we went, and those bucks just came out. We bumped them out of the bottom of that basin. They were going everywhere, and Chad and Frankie shot, didn't hit anything, and one came underneath me, one of the ones Chad shot at. I thought I really had something. Holy smokes, this buck's got double droppers. This is crazy. My second buck with double droppers, boom, blew it over, or a shot. It wasn't very far, 100 yards, shot offhand, bam, nailed him. We went over, rolled over, went down there, and it was velvet. He had been rubbing his velvet off. It was hanging down. He's just a 160 buck. He was a nice buck. I mean, great buck for me then, but yeah, I really thought I had something, but oh no, it's just all the velvet hanging down off his horns. Because back then it opened the 10th of September.
Right, you could hunt him.
So it was opening weekend. Yeah, you could
with a rifle.
With a rifle, yeah.
Oh, that's so
now
cool.
It's the 15th, and so they got smarter as time went on over there and said, 10th of September is a little early to be shooting these bucks with a rifle, so let's move it to the 15th when most of the velvet's off, and it changed it drastically when they did that.
Well, it always seems like it changed the weather pattern too. It seems like we always get weather. Yeah, that 15th of September is
the
our
10th of September is still summer.
Yeah,
the 15th of September it's starting to be fall over there. I mean, that's high country. You're talking 10,000 feet plus.
Right. So So first hunts, what, one of the things that I remember growing up, of course, I'm a little bit younger than you, significantly younger than you. One of the things I remember growing up, and you mentioned this earlier, is just growing up in Jackson was like a playground. I think let's iterate a little bit more. The Jackson Hole, which everybody knows, that's not what it looked like. It was 7,000 people lived in that valley, and it was, tons and tons of what we thought was public land. Come to find out, somebody owned all that stuff we were constantly recreating on. What did we do as kids without a TV?
Played with matches, guns, all explosives, all of the above. I mean, it was literally
surfed off the bridges.
Surfed off the bridges in the river, jumped off the cliffs into the river, into the lakes, rode our dirt bikes all around, bought more fireworks than any human should, built our own fireworks out of fireworks we bought to amplify them. Went through 1,022 shells a year.
We had
Literally
our own duck
everything.
pond that
Yes.
we would go duck hunting
We had
on,
our
have a
own
blind on.
duck pond that we used to get run around by the moose every time we went up there.
Yeah.
It took me 35 years to get my payback on one of those things. But yeah, I mean, it was a great place to live. Like my friend Chuck, my best friend Chuck lives over there still, and he came out of the convenience store one day. And Nikki Six from Motley Crue lives over there, and he's sitting on his bumper of his car. And Chuck walks out, and he's kind of a friendly guy. He goes, "Hey, man." He goes, "You like living over here?" Because he lives there now.
Right.
He goes, "Yeah, this is the greatest place ever." And Chuck said, "You should have seen it in the 80s, man." He goes, "You're 30 years too late, dude." And he walked away. The guy was just like, "What's
Was this
that,
thing
asshole?"
around 30 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, riding our bikes up and down all those boardwalks.
Down
We
the
would ride
highway?
our bikes to town. And we lived 13 miles out of town.
Yeah. We'd ride it right
Our
down the
parents,
highway.
They're not giving us a ride to town on the weekend. I would go hang out with my friends in town, ride down the highway 13 miles into town and harass tourists, terrorize the place.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a great place to live.
It gave us so I think it not only gave us a sense of adventure, but it I guess blossomed the sense of adventure that is the Eastman family, which Grandpa Gordon instilled that in our dad and instilled it in us as well. It's just the sense of adventure, a sense of, hey, we can do this. Let's ride our bikes to town, or let's jump in a Super Cub and fly here. Let's do that. Because you're the oldest cousin or the oldest grandchild, you got to hang out with him, as he was retiring out of the video filming stuff and slowing down because of his age. You kind of got to hang out with him a lot, like all summer for years, right?
Yeah, I started I started working with him in the summers before I could drive. So it must have been when I was 13 or 14. And I pretty much helped him in the summers for, well into college, pretty much until he died in 1996. So probably, what was that, about 10, 12 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he really needed the help. Come to find out, I think Grandma just paid me to hang out with him in the summer so he would have a buddy and keep out of her hair, really. But he had me doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, drenched in elk piss, underwater videography, because he had all these cockamamie ideas he invented all kinds of crazy articulated flies and stuff. That he would have this is when Tim Wade first moved here to Cody from California. He's a famous fly shop over there. Yeah. He's retired now. But Gordon and I would go in there. Gordon would sketch out on his notepad these special flies for him to tie. He would tie them up. We'd go out to Newton Lake, and I'd get in there with a wetsuit and my goggles and an underwater camera that Gordon bought, and he'd fish with these bugs underwater and have me film them. Then he'd look at the film and how they're moving and articulating. I mean, just crazy stuff.
But that's just who he was. He did that with everything.
He was always tinkering with everything.
Yeah, airplanes, RC airplanes.
Oh yeah. When he was in Hollywood when we were little kids, he got hooked up with the RC plane guys. In Hollywood, a lot of them, would fly our radio-controlled airplanes on the weekends and stuff in the parks. He got really into that. I mean, he invented and and copyrighted, patented some of his own designs and sold them to these company kit builders that would build these kits. I mean, he was very, very intelligent, as far as not only adventurous, but he's very creative and intelligent, mechanically.
Yeah. He was I just remember as a child, he would be tinkering on, in this corner of the house he'd be tinkering on jewelry. In that corner of the house he'd have a Super Cub RC plane that I swore, I was probably 5 or 6. I swore I could get in that thing. It was so freaking big. And then the other corner he'd be, camera equipment or booms or whatever. It was just constantly tinkering with things.
Yes.
Constantly.
Yeah, constantly.
So and the other cool thing is you got to go on some adventures with him. I mean, in the summers, I'd hear about Alaska, and you'd go up to British Columbia, go steelhead fishing. I mean, you went a lot of places with him.
Yeah, he and I went a lot of places. Of course, it was all in the summer, which not necessarily hunting season. So I didn't hunt with Gordon all that much, but most of it was around fishing, filming, summer filming, wildlife, and bird watching. Gordon was a really adamant bird watcher. Yeah. He knew all the birds. He had a book, marked them off, ones he'd seen. But most people probably don't know that. He's a very good bird watcher, RC plane builder, and gardener.
Yes.
Had a really good green thumb. I think that comes back from the old family in Washington, where they could grow a lot of their own food. And so he was a hell of a gardener.
I remember as a kid sitting in their garden and just like made myself sick on strawberries. They could grow the strawberries over here. Yeah. Of course, we're coming from Jackson where you can't grow anything. Yeah, barely grass.
Yeah.
So
totally.
He did have a green thumb. So what are some of the stories that really resonated with you because you go to Alaska with him, that's a lot of miles unless you flew, which
we flew.
You did fly.
But we drove a lot too to other places. A lot of miles of driving. He was
sucking on cancer sticks.
Yep, just smoking cigarettes, and if I was lucky, he'd roll the window down a little bit for me, and just story after story after story. Just tell me stories. Unbelievable. I really, it's one of those things you have. At the time you're a kid, you don't think about it. You think, oh yeah, okay, I've heard this one 50 times, and I should have recorded them, wrote them down, something, because a lot of them are all gone. I was probably the last one he told them to, really.
Yeah.
And then he went to start writing a book when he really got older, when I was in college, and his mind had started to slip and he couldn't remember all the details from them. So unfortunately, my mind was too young to really soak them into the level I should have. And his ended up being gone. So the one that really has most of the details of those stories for what they are is Dad.
Yeah, because he heard them fresh, like right after they happened most of the time.
Yeah, but he had a lot of stories. I mean, just literally, whenever I go with him, even when we did go into a hunting camp, it just one story after another. And actually, Dad kind of does that now too.
He holds court.
But Gordon was, that on steroids, and pretty soon the guides, the outfitters, the people, everybody else, like, hey, we got to go to bed, because people they'd stay up till midnight listening to his stories, just one after another.
Do you have a favorite?
Oh, trying to think back. Yeah, I mean, the one where he got bucked off the horse, I think that was up. I think it was up in British Columbia, where he got bucked off the horse and the saddle horn hit him in the face. The horse rolled over on him and broke his nose, and his eyes swelled shut.
Oh my gosh.
And he was back there in the wilderness in the backcountry for 2 days.
By himself?
By himself. When the horse ran off and his eyes were swelled shut and he couldn't see anything, and a grizzly bear came in and run him up a tree.
Oh my
gosh. And so then he'd come down out of the tree, stumble around for a while, and the grizzly bear would come back and he'd have to go up the tree. Went up the tree like 3 times, had to sleep in it. In the tree. Gosh. Yeah. Crazy. And finally the swelling went down enough he could see and walk back to camp. His buddies thought he was dead because a horse come back without him on it. It was
probably bloody.
Just a crazy story. Bloody. Yeah. It was, and unfortunately I can't remember all the details, but it was hilarious. I mean, crazy, but the way he told it, it was funny. And the funny thing about Gordon, the way he'd tell a story, you'd sit there and go, holy shit, are you serious? But he would tell it in a funny way, but you'd laugh at it and he'd look at you like, why are you laughing? That's not funny.
It was
he
funny.
didn't mean it to be funny, but the way he told it was just hilarious. But he didn't really, fashion himself a comedian, but he was a funny guy.
Oh, all these years, 47 years on this planet, I've never heard that story.
Yeah,
I did not know that one.
Dad knows a little bit more of the details than I do, but yeah, that's
the story that I remember the best is, and I heard him tell it, is the one where him and I don't remember who he was with. They land the Super Cub in British Columbia. They're headed to Alaska, or they're headed to Northwest Territories, I think, and landed the Super Cub and popped a tire in the middle of nowhere trying to get fuel
and bent the prop.
Yep, bent the prop.
They had to take the prop off with what tools they did have and pound it as straight as they could, and then filled the tire with willows.
And sewed
it
up with their
totally
boots.
Gordon, and sewed it up with I don't know what it was, a fishing line or something, or fly line or something, and were able
shoelaces.
And he was bootlaces maybe, and Warren was able to take off, left Gordon there. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and Gordon doesn't know if he's going to make it with a bent prop and a popped tire, and just hoping he makes it back. So Gordon just went fishing, hung out for 5 days, and pretty soon here comes the plane back, picks him up.
Those are just different times.
Before GPS, cell phones, any of that stuff. I mean,
now I know I know exactly where my kids are every second of the day. I just pop an app open.
Yeah.
Then for 30 days you don't know. Well, he was Northwest Territories. He'd be gone for 90 days.
Yeah, whole summer.
Never know.
He'd be gone. Grandma would be like, all right, see ya. Be gone for... I mean, our early childhood, I remember going out to the ranch all the time, riding the horses and stuff out there, and he was never there.
Really?
Between his adventures in Hollywood, never there. Like, if Gordon was there, it was like, whoa, Grandpa's here? That's crazy.
And
he was never around.
Also got the glimpse of the wolf compound.
That's when he
right?
had the wolves, yeah.
Yeah.
So I do remember those wolves. That's one of my first memories being out there, those wolves in the compound. I'd walk up to that fence, and they would go nuts. Nuts. And I'd always ask them, why are they going crazy? And Grandpa told me they want, you're a kid. They want to put you in the den. They think you got out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they patterned themselves to him being the alpha wolf. And so in their mind, there wasn't much difference between wolves and humans. And I was a little kid, so they're like, oh, one of Gordon's pups got out. We got to get it and put it down in the den.
Wow.
In safety, I mean, it was really wild. It was like something out of Swiss Family Robinson or something, when you had those wolves and all that stuff going on. And he'd always have people out there from Hollywood and stuff that come out, it's kind of like, what in the world is he talking about? And they'd come out to see it. They had to see it to believe it, right? I mean, come out to Wyoming. I mean, back then, Jackson Hole, Wyoming was unknown to most of those people. If you're in California and you hear him telling stories, this guy's got a compound with 12 wolves in it. We got to see this to believe it. And they'd come out to his ranch just to look at it,
Jeez.
It was quite the anomaly. Just the stuff that they did. The Game and Fish would call him, oh, Gordon, your wolves got out and killed an elk up here in the park. Can you come get them? We don't need to be having the wolves kill elk alongside the highway in the park. Can you imagine that this day and age? If you had pet wolves and they got out and killed an elk along the road in a national park?
You'd end up in prison.
The Park Service used to let him cruise up and down the road picking up roadkill. They'd tell him where roadkill was. He'd go pick it up and throw it in the wolf compound for the wolves to eat.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Well, and he wasn't home, so it was probably grandma and dad and his two brothers doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I just remember pallets of Alpo dog food, pallets of it, to feed those wolves if they couldn't get, enough roadkill.
That's crazy. So you did this with Grandpa Gordon, and then schooling, which the one interesting thing about Jackson is back then the school was really, really good. I mean, the high school, middle school, all that stuff, or junior high was really, really good. And it allowed you some opportunities in college. Let's talk about college.
Yeah.
Don't go down that road. But you didn't go to UW.
No, Jackson Hole back then was a really good school system. I don't think it's quite as good now. Maybe it is, but we had teachers that were way overly educated to be doing schooling because of where it was.
They wanted to live there.
I didn't know then. I said, oh, cool, that's Mr. Burnfield's got a degree from Harvard. Oh, Mr. Masterson's got a PhD from MIT in quantum physics, and he's our calculus teacher. I mean, these guys they just wanted to live there because they were skiers and outdoor people, and there wasn't a lot of jobs there. You either worked for the government of some kind or you're a realtor. That's pretty much Jackson Hole, and so, we had very, very high level teachers back then, and it, allowed us to. They had a good AP program where it was very, very good education for a public school system. Yeah. We were the poorest school district in Wyoming. I know that back then, which people can't believe that.
Right.
Hell, we went down to basketball game in Rock Springs. I couldn't believe my eyes. They had swimming pools, tennis courts, all kinds of stuff. Our school, they had to go around. I remember they built a new high school. They literally had to go door to door taking donations from the residents to buy the furniture to go in the school, to buy the desks.
Yeah.
We were that poor, but that's before they distributed it evenly throughout the state. Back then, what fueled the school revenue mostly was property taxes, which there wasn't a lot in Jackson Hole because there wasn't a lot of people. It's 98% public land there, but mineral taxes. Well, we had no minerals. There was no mines, no oil wells, nothing there. Whereas down Rock Springs, they were filthy with money.
Yeah.
It was like going to Texas. I was like, oh, this is crazy. They got artificial turf on their football field. I've never seen such a thing in my life. Our track was basically gravel. And they're running on fancy recycled tires, shredded tires and stuff that's all spongy. Like, this is pretty nice. We have to jump over the cracks in our track. Yeah. It's a hurdle, even though it's just an 800 meter. Yeah. So it was much different, back then that way. But we're dumb. I thought, wow, everybody lives in a Jackson Hole. All these towns are like Jackson,
Yeah.
I took it totally for granted. Didn't even think anything about it until I went to college. Then I realized, I did grow up in a very unique, place.
Yep. So after college, a lot of people don't know that you're actually educated in engineering. Is your degree?
Yes. Yeah.
And you worked in engineering for a number of years before coming back to the business, right?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Is it
I got
Pillsbury?
Calculators. Yeah, it was a company at that time was called Diageo. They own all kinds of big companies. They own a lot of I think they got bought up since then by Constellation brands. They owned all kinds of food and beverage stuff. Yeah.
I just remember when you graduated college, you're like, you were going through interview process, and they're like, we can't find somebody to move out west, and you're like, wait, what? I can move out west? I don't have to live in the city?
Idaho Falls, Idaho. I'm like, I know where that is. Like, you actually found someone to move to Idaho? I'm like, yeah. I grew up in Jackson Hole. I know exactly where this is.
This is where we used to grocery shop.
Yeah, I used to get my school clothes here. I'll go there. So I ended up going to Idaho for 2 or 3 years out there doing engineering work, and it was fun. That was a good time. Looking back on it, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if this is what I want to do, but it was a good experience, real world experience, rather than come right back to the family business. So.
Yep. That was one thing that Dad made us do is
go get the same kind of thing.
Go get real world experience. I was in banking.
Yep.
For whatever reason, I have no idea, but that's the path I picked, and then came back. So hunting, we touched on this a little bit, and you had a hell of a year this year, actually. You drew a tag that is not easy to draw, a moose tag. Let's talk about that, and got to go hunt back in the old stomping grounds.
Yep. Took me 20 years, and I finally drew it. Finally drew a moose tag in Wyoming after 20 long years of applying. Every year thinking it might be my year to get the random tag, and never did. But I finally drew it back over there in Jackson, which for years and years I put in elsewhere. And a good friend of ours from Jackson, who still outfits over there, is like, hey, man, you need to put in for that Grovant tag, 17. I'm like, really? You know, because the wolves and the parasites, everything, the moose population really crashed there. And he said, yeah, there's some big bulls in there. So I applied for it, and finally, after 20 years, drew it. And sure enough, it's a good hunt. The moose are starting to come back. You know, in the state.
Is it a habitat thing? How do you think? You know, with your vast knowledge of predators and ungulates and the area, and you know, you are our Wyoming MRS guy, which we're going to get to that here in a minute. But what do you think the factor was that bring the moose population back to where they're shooting? You know, your moose is, it doesn't score as good as the other moose you guys saw in there, but he is one hell of a trophy. Like you're never gonna shoot another moose like that. No. What's a one in? I think Dad did the statistics. 1 in 200 or 26,000 or some stupid thing.
Yeah, it's a big moose, mature moose. And, you know, moose are interesting because they actually collect quite a bit of data on them. And so you can dig into the Game of Fish's data and get a pretty good idea of what makes each area tick, how each one's different. That area in particular borders the park. So you get a lot of park moose moving in and out. There's resident moose that are always there too. But there's lots of bulls in there. The bull-to-cow ratio is super, super high, and a lot of mature bulls. And for that reason, and I talked to game fish guys, I got, talked to every game warden who'd stop and talk to me, three different ones, and, getting information from them. And then once they hear you have a moose tag, it's like a sheep tag, right? Everyone gives you all the information you ever need when you have one of those. You know, they're not going to tell you everything with deer or elk. But moose or sheep, they're like, yeah, it takes 20 years to draw it. Here, I'll tell you what I know. Right. So they tell me a lot of stuff, and they were telling me they want to get the quota filled. There's only 5 tags, but they want everyone to kill a bull in there because they got too many bulls and not enough cows. So, that's always a good sign when they say that. So they lengthen the season out till the 15th of November, starts the 15th of September. So it's the whole fall.
So you're gonna
get the whole time.
Pre-rut, rut, post-rut.
Yeah.
You have to hunt them all.
Because moose rut about the 1st to the 15th October. Last 5 to 7 days of September is kind of pre-rut, and then it kind of tapers off. But your prime time is the 1st to the 10th of October for rut, and that's when they really start moving around. They're super callable. I mean, Dan was with me, and he's been up in Canada with Bear Dan, who's a moose guy from Canada who calls him in a lot because it's real thick country in southern BC. So he learned all those moose tricks up there. And man, I'll tell you, they work on our moose down here, 100%. It's totally callable. People ask me, how does moose call in? Like elk calling or different? It's a little different, but I always tell them a moose will come in to a call like you wish a bull elk would. They don't give a shit. They don't care if they smell you, see you, does not matter. They come the shortest distance possible. They don't do the hang up. They don't do the circle around to get the wind right. They come right in looking for action, and they're not shy. It's like once you get them coming, they come slow. It's much slower than an elk call, right? I mean, they're slow and steady, but the way they come in is exactly like you wish a bull elk would.
And they'll come from a long ways.
Yes, their hearing is unbelievable. I really, based on my experience, which is fairly limited, and really everybody's is because I don't think there's many people hunt a lot of Shiras.
Unless you're in Canada.
Yeah. I think their hearing's twice as good as a bull elk.
Really? Of course, their ears are about twice the size too. They're
very good hearing. Their eyesight is not very good. They don't, kind of like a bear. They do not rely on their eyesight. Their smell, I think their sense of smell is good, but they don't care. They're not used to predators. Of course, these moose have a wolves are the predator down here, which is not historically accurate. We'll get into that, I'm sure, at some point, but it's kind of a created predator. But for the most part, in their mind, they don't have a predator, so they don't have to rely on their smell and their eyesight. So they will come right in, and you can get away with murder moving around and
Really?
stuff on them when they're coming in. They do not care. I mean, you've seen it, I'm sure, the videos up north, where they just come in, they get a glaze. Like, I think because there's so few of them, the population, not just now but always, is their density so low that when that bull thinks there's a cow there, he has to go to all ends of the earth to get her bred.
Yeah,
Because there's so few and far between.
Yeah, bullock's breeding 30 to 50 cows.
Yeah.
A moose might be breeding 5.
Yeah, he's got to travel 20 square miles to find the 5 cows in his area. And when he finds one and she's whining because she's hot, because that's when they whine, is when they're hot. Not like a cow elk that just calls all the time and he's got to run around, sniff around, do all this stuff. When the cow's whining, that's go time, and he is not going to believe his eyes, nose, ears, anything else. He's coming right in full blast.
Wow.
And look out. I mean, you know the guys around here that have had stories of them trying to breed their horses with guys on them. Riding a horse.
Yeah, my wife and I, a few years ago, we were taking Dan into an elk area on horseback, and she was leading a mule on the way out, empty. He didn't even have saddle panniers on, and a bull moose, this is the end of September, bull moose just glazed over, just like you said, and he sat and watched me go by, and then that mule went by. I mean, it was a hell of a rodeo.
You get the right smell, the right look, and it's black. Look out!
Yep,
they're coming.
Yep,
and
it was hard to get that unwound. Actually,
yeah. And one thing I should put a footnote here is they can be dangerous.
Yes.
People do have to be careful. They look big and dumb, and they are kind of dumb looking in a cool way, but they can be dangerous animals. Yeah. Even more dangerous than a bison and a buffalo in a lot of respects. So you have to be careful, because when they glaze over, it's hard to snap them out of the trance. We had one up at Ryan's camp when we were hunting elk with Rinda, horseback way back there on the edge of Yellowstone on the southern end there, 20 miles back in the wilderness. We were playing around with it, calling, and there was a young bull, and he went into a trance, and we had to literally hit him over the head with a stick to knock him out of it. I mean,
it's not something
just
you
literally
want to mess around with at 1,800 pounds.
Yes. So you got to be careful. But
so let's talk about your moose a little bit, and we'll show for those that are watching on YouTube, we'll show a photo of this moose. But the fronts on this moose are really unique. What is that? Why is that different?
Because he has 2 palms, front palms, back palms, which is very rare for a Shiras moose. You see it up north, like the big moose up in Alaska and Yukon. They'll get them where they get those big front palms. I call them risers, and of course the main palm too. But generally speaking, your Shiras moose will have one spike or a fork spike out the front. And the way you tell maturity in moose is by the palm, the points on the palm. That's why, like in Alaska, they have to be either 50 inches wide or have 3 or more points on the front palm, because that's a sign of maturity, right? So, and mine has 5 on each front. So, as a Shiras, that's almost unheard of. That's really, really overly mature, crazy genetics. Dad says, and I believe him, the Kosher, old time outfitter in the Yukon, told him that his dad, Warner, did the research on it, and it's a genetic leftover from the Ice Age.
Really?
Because that shows up every once in a while in moose, where they get those giant front palms that are more than, in those moose, like the whole palm is just one huge piece. It doesn't even separate into 2 separate palms.
Instead of going back, it goes forward too.
Yeah.
Well, and you see a lot of those moose, with the front palms. You see them in Kamchatka and Russia. That's kind of a thing that is over there.
Yeah, I think it's much more common for them over there. But they're over here too. And all the moose genetically are identical.
Yeah.
The only thing that it's just a geographic variation. I mean, our
like
moose are the furthest southern moose. And they're smaller in body size because we don't have the weather, but they're genetically identical to the big ones up north.
So you're the MRS guy here for Wyoming and have been for a long time. The history of the MRS, though, my gosh, I think we just printed our 200th issue, and I think Todd told me it was 30 years ago when the first MRS, what we're going to call the members research section, which was like 4 pages in the middle of the magazine back then. It has progressed to what it is now, and now we have TagHub, which we'll touch on here in a second. But you were very instrumental in that progression of the MRS. Let's kind of, give us the overview of how that progressed and why it did and what you did to make it different and what makes it different than everything else and why it's important. I wanted to share with you my recent experience with Sawyer products. They offer a great selection of products that are must-have if you're on an outdoor adventure. Their range includes water filtration systems, insect repellent, sunscreen, and even first aid kits, so you can be prepared for any situation in the backcountry. I highly recommend their dependable and top-notch lightweight products for your next outdoor adventure. The water filters work in any situation. They even have one that is good for 400,000 gallons of water. And if you buy a water filter, you're helping to save lives all over the world. They donate millions of filters to communities that don't have clean, drinkable water. I also love their sunscreen. It lasts all day, is not greasy, and is virtually scent-free. Their bug spray repels ticks and other biting bugs. You put it on your clothes or your pets, and it's good for 6 washings. It even works on my horses. So before your next adventure, check them out at Sawyer.com and let them know you heard it here, and thank them for supporting Eastmans.
Well, I was not here when that thing was started. That was, we were probably kids back at that point. But it was very simple. Just, Dad and Rod Hart, who was editor at the time, thought, there was this. That's when the draws just first started happening. Okay, where Nevada and Arizona were some of the first states to say, "Hey, we're going to have elk draws where we're going to limit the amount of tags." And so, well, how did people know what areas those are? What makes those areas better? Which one's better than another? Here's 10 areas. Which one's the best one or the best 2 or 3? And so that's where they started doing that. And there was just a section that was only it was a supplement. Actually, at that time, it was an insert in the magazine that was just black and white, but it would list the states and like the top 10 areas for elk in each state. And that's kind of how it started. And it was just a listing of unit numbers at that point, and then it has now grown into all the data that make that, that unit unique or better than another. So you can really, like we're talking about with moose, you can really dig down and see what the stats on that hunt are.
So when you talk about the data, what are why is that data important, and what are some of the data points that well, let's talk about, we'll get into the details, but let's talk 30,000 foot. You've chipped, let's talk Wyoming. You've chipped, we call them chipped each area for each species. Let's talk about moose because, once again, who cares? You're not going to draw a moose tag but once every 20 years. We might as well give secret sauce here, right?
Right.
So what's the chipping system?
The chipping system is basically, I came up with an idea of color coding the areas on a map so people can just visually look at it and see, the blue ones are the best, the green ones are good, the yellow's marginal, and then the white or orange is either closed or not good at all. So it just gives people a spectrum of, what's the best areas? Because there are a lot of guys that just put in for the best stuff, right? They just want to put in for all 9 western states just the best areas for each species, and that's the way they go.
There's other guys, it's going to be the best moose.
Yes, and then there's other guys who dig down and go, okay, well, what's I don't want to wait 25 years to draw a tag. Where's something that's maybe 15 years that's not quite the best but still good or has a lot of upside potential, like we're talking about moose. And the area I drew was not the best area in the state. It was at one time when we were kids, but it's probably going to be one of the first ones to come back of those units. There are better units now in the Snowy Range and the Bighorns and whatnot, statistically speaking. But that's kind of where I play most of my game personally, is in that green/light blue areas where, I know I can hunt hard, I can get around, I can get horses if I need to, I can, all the obstacles that that most people fight, I can, figure out a way through those so I don't have to go to just the best area that's almost impossible to draw. Right. So I'm always operating in that mid-level. And there's a lot of guys like that. The bow hunters in particular, they always, are looking for good areas, don't have to necessarily be the best, for what they're doing.
So what are some of the data points that change that from a green area to a blue area or versus a yellow area?
One of the biggest factors is success rate. If I had to just pick one thing to look at, it's hunter success. Really, really good, the best moose areas, for instance, best sheep areas, they're all 100%. Everybody gets a ram. Everybody gets a bull moose, that draws that tag. That's usually one of the biggest. It's not the only factor, but it's the biggest weighting in that score. With elk, those really, really good elk areas in Wyoming, those best elk areas, those blue chippers, they're all 75% or more on branch antler bulls. So if you draw those, you're going to kill a bull.
Right, a branch antler bull.
Yes.
Maybe not a 400.
The green ones are like 50-50. Yellow ones, you're down like the generals. They're, for instance, a general elk tag in Wyoming is about 28% success. So you get 10 hunters and 3 of them might kill bulls out of 10. Whereas those same 10 hunters in Area 100 out there, they're all going to kill a bull.
Right.
9 out of 10 of them, maybe 10 out of 10. So that's kind of the difference. But there's other factors too. It's not just success. Season date, I always look at the season dates. Quota, I always look at the quota because I want to know how many people I'm competing with. For instance, a moose tag, only 5, or moose hunt, there's 5 tags. Okay, it's me and 4 other guys. I ended up knowing who 2 of the other ones were. I talked to an outfitter guy in the outfitter in the area. He had the non-resident. There's only one non-resident hunter, so I had pretty good, thumb on how many people are in there and who they were and when they filled out. When we killed my bull, I was the last tag left. I knew that for a fact.
So you knew
the
most of
guy.
The majority of the people. That's
yeah.
Really
now I have a lot of connections, right? The normal person probably won't, but I always want to see how many people I'm competing with, right? On an elk hunt, there's a big difference between competing with 50 other guys in an area and 500. Okay, so
what about? Let's talk about elk. Was it a factor on your moose hunt the other seasons that were open at the same time? Is that something to be considering?
Not for the moose hunt. It would be on like an elk hunt. I always try to look if there's a cow hunt going on at the same time. That can really be a bad deal. The worst one to look for nowadays is these spike hunts, where they run spike hunts in there when guys are trying to trophy hunt bulls.
Utah does a lot of that.
Yes, in the peak of the rut. So you got guys who are hunting in 20th of September who waited 20 years to draw a tag, and then here's all these guys trying to shoot spikes and cows, and they're bugling them in. They're trying to call them in, and so they're just winding everything up, and it creates a real disaster. So I always try to look at what other seasons were open. For the moose, the more season open, the better, because I'd talk to everybody on the trail I saw, and they'd tell me, oh yeah, I saw a moose here, I saw a moose there. They'd tell me exactly where they saw moose. Right. Show me pictures on their phone, digiscope, so they were a great asset to have.
You had a ton of guys out there.
Yeah, there weren't enough elk hunters in there, in my opinion, which I thought I'd never say that. But yeah, for moose, it was different. But if I was hunting elk, yeah, you don't want a ton of other people over the top of you.
Right. So that's the blue chip. That's the chipping system. Some of the things that take into account for that. How is the MRS, in your opinion, it's progressed into digital, and how has that affected the average guy that's going to be looking at Wyoming in the next couple of years?
The digital, the information the data, as I call it, has grown so large that the digital age has allowed us to display and sort that data in a format where guys can get it in an easier format than looking at it on paper, right? Like, for instance, the elk chart, Wyoming elk main table that houses all the data. Now, I put the antlerless hunts in there now, so I have both the bulls, the generals, and the cow hunts for people, because there are people who like to look at the cow hunts, especially the second choice or the leftover.
If I don't get a bull, I want to shoot a cow, fill the freezer.
And so those are in there too. So it's literally every elk hunt available in Wyoming. But that table has over 40,000 data points in it.
Oh my gosh.
You can't, I mean, it's hard to put that on paper. It would, even if you made it the size of a poster on your wall, you could barely read it. But a digital format allows that to be housed and for you to easily bring up just the information you want to look at, not sort through.
So you can
40,000 data points.
Yeah, you can sort it and go, okay, here's my bull hunts that I'm focusing on, and then save that search, and then here's my cow hunts that I'm focusing on, and save that search, and here's my top end bull hunts. Here's my general opportunity. Those different success rates. You can save all those hunts, so you're not having to sort through that poster size thing and make notes on it. It just makes it more simple.
Yep. And the sorting's important. Like I'll go back to moose because it's a little simpler. I was able to really digest the moose data for my moose area by sorting that table by, okay, what area I'm going to sort the whole table, which isn't huge for moose. I think in Wyoming there's like just shy of 50 hunts, for bull moose. I think there's 47 or something, maybe. We'll say 50. All these 50 hunts, I want to sort it for average spread. Because that's how guys measure moose, like the old days of mule deer. 40-inch bulls, 30-inch bulls, 50-inch bulls. So, what's average? Because the state gathers all that information. I sorted it by average spread, and then top spread, so I could see, rank them 1 through 50 for average spread. And of course, my area was in the top 5 when I did that. Okay, the largest spread, which is the largest bull killed in the last 7 years. Sort it that way. Oh, my area pulled up again in the top 5 there. Then I sort it by quota, for the lowest quota to the biggest. Oh, my area
once again
in the top 5. So again, I'm not looking for the best area in the state, but I'm saying, okay, what are the things important to me? I want a mature bull with a wide spread. I want upside potential, which is the biggest, where's the biggest bulls coming from? That's a genetic indicator. And then I want to not compete with a lot of other hunters, but also have a decent draw. And then I can sort it by which takes the least amount of points to the most amount of points, and see where it falls in all those sorts. And that area 17 just constantly in the top 5, in the top 5, in the top 5. Almost every criteria. A long season. I wanted a long season, so I had plenty of time to hunt that moose.
Especially with
top 5, every sort I did. And so then I'm like, yes, I'm around. Then I dug down even deeper into the raw data, got when people killed those bulls and how big they were. And I put a listing of that in, and I made a bell curve, and I knew that most of the big bulls, I took out the little bulls, kick them off. You only got 5 a year, and you got 7 years of data, so you're like 35 bulls. Okay, it's not a
kick
huge
off the
data
bottom
set.
3 in the top.
Right,
30.
I made a bell curve. I'm like, oh yeah, October 5th is the average day that someone kills average 42-inch bull. Bull in there is 42-inch wide, and it was killed on October 5th or 7th. I can't remember. Let's say the 7th. Yeah. Right in the peak of the rut. And so I knew, and sure enough, I killed mine October 11th. Got the right weather, bulls started moving around, and I knew it was a needle in a haystack scenario. It's just a matter of time. And the game wardens told me that. I said, just be patient. It's a matter of time. He said, the guys, and that's another thing the Wyoming Game Fish tracks is how many days each person hunts. So that's an indicator.
How many days?
That's how hard the hunt is. The more days it takes, the harder the hunt is. Now that's one area that's one metric that area did struggle in, is the guys had to hunt a lot of days. They had to hunt almost 20 days.
Holy cow!
They killed big bulls, big mature bulls, 6 years old on average, which is old. I mean, mine's 7.5. There's bulls in there killed that are 11.
Wow.
Top side, but as far as their data is concerned, you got to also compare to other areas. It's they killed the older bulls in that unit, so they had to hunt 20 days. So I knew it wasn't going to be an easy hunt. And the game wardens told me, I said, be patient. The guys struggle in here. They have to hunt a lot of days, but when they do kill bulls, they kill big ones, and that's exactly what happened. We hunted almost 30 days.
So if you're in the running for a moose tag, hold all your all of your time off because you may need it.
Mm-hmm.
You may not be able to go on that beach vacation with the wife in March.
It's a needle in a haystack. You're looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
With those, and some elk hunts are that way too. But like I said, that's another factor I really look at is how many days hunters, and people tend to lie on that a little bit on the surveys.
Well,
I've
it's a
asked
range,
the game
it's
fish
not
that.
an exact day.
Because there's some areas they'll say, I had to hunt 14 days to get my buck. And I'm like, it's a 10-day season.
Yeah.
And I've even asked the game fish guys, people kind of fudge that sometimes. They always want, kind of think they hunted longer
the 3
than
weekends
they did. They
screwed around before.
Yeah. So you got to take that with a grain of salt a little bit, but it is a good indicator. And that information will give you a really good indication of how hard a hunt is, how tough it is. Yeah. Like some of those easier moose hunts in the best top areas, two days? 1.5 days.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So that's the MRS. I do want to touch a little bit about the predator debacle that's happening in the western, especially the mountain states right now. We have this thing in Colorado they're trying to outlaw trophy hunting, which is really trying to get rid of bears and cougar killing.
Yeah, large predators.
Yep. So what's the number one thing that you see the biggest problem with you wrote this article, this blog a number of years ago called The Predator Death Spiral, and those of you who haven't read it, go find it. It's still on our website. It is still accurate today, and it's been 10 years probably, close to it.
That was the first e-news we ever did.
Yep.
Adam Bender came to me and said, hey, can you write something about predators and politics for me for this first e-news? And I said, oh, sure. I put it out there, and next thing I know, I've got the CEO of the Elk Foundation emailing me. I made the top 10 list, the hate list for these environmental animal groups. All this stuff. I mean, it just blew up.
Checking the boxes.
I was checking the box. I wear it with a badge of honor. That's one of the best awards I've ever won. But yeah, it basically, unfortunately, as unfortunate as it was. Not patting myself on the back or anything, but it's really sad, really. But it was predictive of what we're seeing now. Basically, what happens is they minimize through politics in the game fish and federal agencies. They minimize the predator hunting, which brings the predator volume up, which takes the huntable species volume down, which we've seen. I mean, the wolves were a test case basically out here in Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, and the experiment worked, so now they're expanding that. And then what happens is eventually you have a bad winter, and the winters don't kill the predators. And so the death spiral part of it is that your ungulates or the prey levels get so low that they can never crawl out of the hole because the winter kills them off and there aren't enough. Then their level gets so low, the predators don't drop, and the predators just skim the cream off the top constantly, and the animals never come back. It's happened in eastern Montana with places I've hunted with antelope, that they had a bad winter, most of the antelope died off. Well, there's so many coyotes that the coyotes basically eat every fawn antelope that is dropped on the ground, and they still have no antelope out there 20 years later. There isn't enough of a population after a bad winter with the predator curve. There's not enough of a population of does or cows in the elk's case or moose's case to produce enough offspring to outrun the predator curve. You know what I mean?
So they're just waiting for an anomaly, a winner, to knock them below that bar, whatever that bar is, population-wise, that is carrying capacity is also what they call it. Knock them below that carrying capacity far enough that the predators maintain, and it drops the carrying capacity below huntable numbers.
Yeah, it takes hunting opportunity away, basically.
And with the other thing that I've heard guys talk about is with the predators, what do you feel? Because you said you said that the predator numbers never drop. We would, if I was sitting on the other side of the table, I'd say, yeah, but if the ungulate numbers or the prey numbers drop, then the predator numbers are going to drop as well because there's not enough to eat. Well,
eventually. Well, in the Lewis and Clark days, let's go back then, they will. There's wild swings in populations. I mean, you can read, the journals when they came out here and what they heard from the Indians. I mean, the Indians told them there was crazy swings. These entire tribes that starved to death sometimes because there was no buffalo or whatever, and then there'd be too many buffalo. I mean,
Right.
These wild swings, which is kind of nature's way of doing it, right? But these are over long periods of time. I mean, Lewis and Clark, they almost starved to death out here. They did fine till they got to Billings, and they got harassed by all the grizzly bears. When they went up over the Continental Divide, there was nothing to eat up there. Even the Indians were struggling to survive up there. Those Indians would have to come off the top of the Continental Divide, where they spent the summer, clear down here to kill buffalo, to
Hundreds
take
of miles.
back to survive the winter. There was nothing up there. So, we lived when we were kids in probably in the generation before us, Dad's generation, in these massive populations of wildlife, which may be gone forever because they've started tinkering with these, biologically tinkering with the management system that created that, right? And it's pretty sad and scary, so to speak, because I don't know if it will ever be the same. When we were kids, Yellowstone burned 1988, created the largest biomass of elk habitat on steroids that we may have ever seen in human history on this continent. And the elk population exploded to almost 30,000 animals up there because of that burn.
which is down to like 3,000 animals now.
And so they were trying years and years when we were kids. They were trying to hunt them, the Gardner hunt, the late season hunts in Jackson Hole when they would come out of the park, and trying to control them that way. Well, some moronic biologist said, "Well, I got a better way to do it. Let's put wolves in there.
Yeah, let's hunt them all
Let's
year
do
round.
it biologically. Okay, let's put iodine in the petri dish. Okay. We're gonna. Someone put lake trout in Yellowstone Lake. Holy shit, we can't have that, but we'll put wolves in Yellowstone. So they're talking out both sides of their mouth about this
I never
stuff,
thought
right?
of that. You're right.
And so they dropped the wolves in there, and it took a while for them to take hold. Those elk didn't know anything about super predators. Grizzly bears, a little bit in the spring on their calves, whatever. Not that big a deal. It's not
Right.
going to wreck the curve that way, especially when we got 25,000 animals producing calves each year. Wolves a whole different story, and they just absolutely massacred the moose first,
Right.
because that's their natural prey. And these moose down here weren't used to, like we talked earlier. They don't, in their mind, they don't have a predator. What are these furry doggies doing?
Right.
We got a problem,
Yeah,
And in
belly
the deep
deep in
snow,
snow.
yeah,
The wolves are
and
running
they
on
just
top.
massacred them. And then they got into the elk and tore the elk down. And then, the problem with doing it that way is they don't have control over that. And then there was this big fight for control of the wolves, which took decades. That's in every court room between Denver and Missoula. Meanwhile, the wolves are chomping away at everything they see in the whole process, while the pinheads with their glasses and paper pushers are sitting there pushing paper. The wolves are demolishing everything in sight. And it'll never be like Lewis and Clark's days, okay? There's too much ranching out here, too many towns.
Yeah.
So there's a food source. No matter, even if they kill all the wildlife, there's the next best thing, and an easier thing, actually, which is
Cattle.
farm animals,
Yep.
ranching. And Colorado's going to learn that lesson big time, because I'll tell you right now, Colorado does not have the wild spaces and places and vastness that Montana and Idaho have. That state, it has some really rugged country, but thanks to all the gold mining way back in the 1800s and early 1900s, there's towns where there really shouldn't be, all these little gold mining towns, which now are ski resorts, ski areas. Mm-hmm. They don't have these huge wildernesses that are roadless like we have over here, where you go 300 miles before you hit another road system out the other side, or 100 miles, whatever it is. They don't have any of that down there. It's going to be chaos. Down there.
And the other thing that they don't have, they have the wildlife, but it's not as vastly distributed as Idaho, Montana, Wyoming.
Yep.
It's in pockets.
Yep. And their wildlife was crashing.
Right.
For other reasons, completely crashing before they put the wolves in. This is just going to
Bears,
accelerate
lions.
that from the bears, the lions, and non-consumptive usage.
Right.
Winter skiing, all this stuff, hiking in the summer, bothering these animals has had a detrimental effect on particularly the elk, the reproduction of the elk.
Yeah. Well, you look
because that state is overly recreated.
Yeah. One of the places that we visit a lot is Salt Lake, because it's kind of the center of our hunting world. Kind of. So we visit there a few times a year. And throughout our lifetime, and just going through Park City from when we were kids, it was a wide spot in the frickin' interstate to what it is now, and that's all winter range. All of those houses are sitting on deer and elk winter range, and last winter was a perfect example. What happens? Those animals, because they can't winter there because it's a ski hill and 4,000 houses. They're having to winter, they're getting pushed down off the mountain, and they end up downtown Salt Lake. They had to push elk out of downtown Salt Lake last year because of that. So let's talk about the winter. You mentioned this before with the antelope in Montana. Is that what's happened in Wyoming with that one anomaly winter, the winter of 22, 23?
That's what I'm afraid of. It seems like, and we're gonna have Gary Freilich, who's a good friend of mine. He's the main biologist for the Wyoming range deer herd, which is probably the most coveted deer herd in the whole country, on the podcast. And he's got more data than I do. I kind of just go by my gut and what I hear on the ground. He actually has helicopters and radio callers. Right. I just have people I talk to in bars, restaurants, and dives. And outfitter camps, but I'm afraid that in some places, it seems like we've lost about 60 to 75% of those populations of antelope and deer in key areas. And, they'll come back. I think they'll come back. The good thing we have going for us there is Wyoming people are pretty hard on coyotes and mountain lions, and where those deer died, it's not a huge mountain lion population type area. It's not the type of country that mountain lions do well in. It's not rim rocky kind of country. And so I think that they may escape the predator curve a little bit, but it's going to take time. Yeah. It's going to take a lot of time. When you have a die off of that magnitude, it's going to take time. It's not it happens, right? I mean, this is the worst one in probably 70 years, but you talk to the old timers, like Wendell's dad told our dad Wendell told our dad that his dad said there was almost no deer down there around Evanston when he was a kid. Yeah. That'd be in the 20s and 30s. The ranchers in Jackson Hole told Dad that when they saw a moose for the first time in the late 1920s in Jackson Hole, they stopped their horses and looked at it like in amazement. So there is historical data through word of mouth of very low animal populations at certain points in this state. I think we all lived through the 60s and 70s, our parents did, and even in the 80s, and kind of got a little bit of a jaded view of what's possible. Humans have a tendency to believe that history is one generation ahead of us and one generation behind us, and our generation, and it's not. Yeah, it's not that small. Yeah, so I don't think it's as bad as it is. I don't think it's completely unprecedented. Yeah, it's gonna take time. The good thing is this winter's been very, very good. Oh my gosh! I mean, I was taking Christmas good
tree.
As you can see.
I was taking Christmas lights off my house in a T-shirt this year. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it was the 1st of January. Yeah, in a T-shirt. Gary texted me the other day, and the deer were just starting to get into the winter range, and this is January.
Last year, his deer showed up at the end of October, first week or 10 days of November.
Never left.
So they'd already been on the winter range for 2 months by now. And that makes a huge difference too, right? Because that's not great forage. It's winter range, but it's not great feed, right?
Right.
It's survivor feed. And when they have to come onto it in November and survive clear till June on it, it's not good. It's like you trying to survive on ramen noodles all winter,
right.
Whereas you can have steak dinner every once in a while up a little higher. And so those deer kind of come in healthy. They're going to come in fat because the summer was really wet, a lot of lush habitat. So I think, cross our fingers, knock on wood, if it continues like this, we're going to see a lot of twins, fawns for what does are out there. And that'll start to build us back.
He was telling me recently that it's not only that these deer came in fat, but they came in without the burden of a fawn.
Yes.
Most of them.
Because they aborted last year.
Yep. So they came into the rut really healthy. They rutted really healthy. The winter range, because there was so much moisture and we had a really good habitat growth year, the winter range is in a better shape than it's been in 10 years. So they're going in and they're not utilizing that. So it's what they call leftover feed potentially for next year, and then you start that snowball in reverse. In the winter range, habitat's better, lots of twins, I was talking to the biologist here a couple weeks ago, and he said the beautiful thing is we're getting really close to the point, if we can get to that 1st of February, it will be a non-factor. No matter what really happens, unless we get a real cold spring that kills the fawns when they drop. Other than that, you're almost to the point now that it won't really matter what happens.
We get to now. So the spring storms can be really vicious on them.
Yeah,
but usually when we're having already a bad winter, right? I mean, you get to the point where it's a function of the amount of daylight hours. You're getting enough sun all day that without some anomaly like thawing, crusting snow where they can't get to the feed.
Right.
The thaw freeze thing that we get in the spring, but you're just getting enough sunlight hours that it starts to melt off those south-facing slopes, even when it's really cold and the winter just can't take back a hold because you're getting enough sunlight, and that starts to happen. And, well, as you know, around Valentine's Day, about middle of February, and then by March we're getting a fair amount of sunlight then.
So, and I know we've been talking here for an hour and some change. Obviously social media, you're on social media. Which one do you spend the most time on? Interacting with people.
Probably on Instagram. I used to do more Facebook, but that's on my computer in my office, and I don't get on there as much. It seems like Instagram is the most.
So if guys want to,
I think it's NG Eastman on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. They follow you and check out what's going on.
Yeah. I should do more on there. I'm not really a very prolific.
I'm not either. I need to do more.
Social media guy, but.
So I always ask there's 3 questions that I ask each one of my guests, at least a variation of these 3 questions. One of them, which is a pretty deep question, and you can take it wherever you want. But God willing, you have the ability to sit in a deathbed. It doesn't, your death doesn't come getting hit by a bus downtown Salt Lake or something. If you have deathbed opportunities, what are you going to be thinking about? What are the things that Guy Eastman's going to be reminiscing or thinking about or wishing?
I actually have one of those guys that thought about that a little bit. Amigo Fred, who you had on the podcast, a good friend of ours. I spent some time in Africa with, and he and I talked about that one night. And I've tried to live my life like without regrets on my deathbed, right? If I can. I mean, you're always going to probably have some, but every opportunity I try to take advantage of as far as adventures, travels, because that's what's important to me. Maybe it's probably in my blood, going back to Gordon thing. So, I've tried to take advantage. There's a few more I'd like to do, probably. Maybe a few I don't get to, but I've done the major ones. Africa was a huge one. Tajikistan, sheep hunting. Northwest Territory, back in Grandpa's footsteps in the Northwest Territory. Done that one. So, those are the things I'll be thinking. Aside from the family stuff, which I'm sure everybody will, think about that. But as far as those adventures and just reminiscing, hopefully my mind is crisp enough to think about that stuff. Just reminiscing on all those stories and all those adventures, with family. We've been lucky enough to hunt together as a family for a long time, starting with Gordon. And Dad and I have had a lot of adventures, the two of us, talked about a lot of them in Africa and even fishing adventures, And so those will be front and center, I'm sure.
So the question, and I separated the hunting conversation with that one. What is it? What's the main motive for you to hunt?
The main motive for me to hunt is the adventure. I just like each hunt's different. For instance, a moose hunt's kind of the highlights for now, of this year, and it's at the front of my mind because it's the most recent, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'll never get to hunt a moose again. So, but I'm kind of, I'm like Gordon. I get really into things for a while, and then I'm off onto something else. And, I was really into mule deer hunting for a long time, and I still am. But then I got into the sheep thing and, kind of the moose thing a little bit here. And so, I hunt for the adventure, and, it's always new. See new places, meet new people. It's not all about just the killing necessarily and the success of it, because there's a lot that are not successful hunts. Nobody really sees those, but they exist, as you know. There's a lot of them, but they're all meaningful in their own way.
So I know the moose thing is just really fresh, but have you picked what the next thing you're going to focus on is yet?
Oh, sheep.
Sheep.
I think I have enough points this year to draw sheep in Wyoming, so that's my next one for this fall.
So bighorn sheep.
Yeah. I have 21 points. Everyone in the area that had 21 points last year drew it, and I got 21 points this year. So knock on wood, cross my fingers. Hopefully this will be the year for that. And then I don't know after that. I'd like to go back to Africa. I want to take my daughter to Africa. I think you're thinking about doing the same thing. She's old enough now. She's 9. Going on
airplane
18.
rides aren't as scary at that age.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to show her Africa. I mean, she just wants to see the animals. She's not into the hunting part of it, and maybe that'll be a good way to kick her off on that. Right. She's just starting to get to that age to understand it. But I took my wife there a couple of years ago, before we had Cora, and it was just a really great experience. I mean, Africa, as you know, it's hard. It's almost impossible to go there once. Yep. I mean, it really is a very unique place, and it's the type of place you can take your family or people who aren't necessarily 100% into the hunting itself, because there's so much else, other things there to do and see and adventure, and it's a very economical, half a world away adventure that's attainable for most people. I mean, it's more economical than most North American hunts.
Yeah, you could spend about the same amount on a decent elk hunt.
Yeah.
And I think the other interesting thing about Africa is you can do it as bougie as you want, or you can go as extreme out, in the bush, to whatever level you want to do and whatever level you're comfortable with. And I've done a couple pretty extreme ones and a bougie one, and I'm going to take my kids' introduction kind of a little bit of a bougie, because it is a shock. At 13, it's going to be an absolute shock.
Yeah.
You don't want to be shocked and then not sleeping because they're afraid of whatever they saw all day coming through that screen door.
Yeah.
So It's a little different.
Yeah.
But that is unique. That is, that's pretty cool. So the last one, and I'm excited to hear this. The last question I ask is, if you had the opportunity, or if you get the opportunity to do a TED Talk, which for the audience, a TED Talk is a speech that's less than 10 minutes long. Usually they're about 4 to 4 to 7 minutes long, and it's about something that you're passionate about and know a lot of, what would you do a TED Talk on?
I don't think I'd ever be asked to do a TED Talk. I think some of the TED Talks I've listened to, which is not very many, are kind of out there. But I would love to do a TED Talk on fly fishing, of all things. I'm really, really into fly fishing. I've never really had a chance to talk about it or much or do anything with it, professionally, obviously, but it really, really is a passion. I would like to be able to talk about it or do something with it someday, just because I think it's pretty interesting. Getting popular nowadays, with more and more popular, unfortunately, as we see with all these rivers. But it's I'm really, really into fly fishing. It's probably more of a passion than the hunting at this point in my life for me.
So do you have any big fly fishing trips coming up?
I've gone a lot of places. We've fished a fair amount around the world doing that too, which isn't part of the business, so most people may not know that. But honestly, the fishing close to home is I just really get a kick out of it. Sleeping in my own bed, fiddling with my own gear, go down here to the local rivers, or even up in Montana, not a couple hours away, and fishing that local stuff that's where I really, really enjoy that. It doesn't have to be some crazy adventure to the Amazon, for peacock bass, which was cool. I'd do that again in a heartbeat. But for me, just staying here close to home is really, really a gem. It's really one of the reasons I like living here the way we do. But
well, that's cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on, sharing the
thanks
story.
For having me.
Yeah, we'll do this again.
You must have run through the whole industry. I don't know. Poor audience.
No,
got all the way to the last one on the list.
I waited until the audience got big enough that it did you justice.
Oh, okay. So I'll get a couple more followers on my NG Eastman account on
Yeah.
I almost said Spotify. That's where my TED Talk is on Instagram.
Fly fishing with Guy Eastman on Spotify.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Your next podcast.
Yeah.